Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from DAWGS BLOG for tonight's podcast on February 7th, 2019. Judge Reniga got on the bench around 1:34 p.m. in regards to jury was not up yet. The document that she had shown Robert Woody on the stand yesterday, which she's saying was her personal work product, but showed it to a witness who was testifying. And the defense attorneys had asked to see what the transcript that she had showed her. It was a one-page document. She said it had her personal notes on there, and it was a list of facts or some type of thing like that, where she was using it, and she used it for some reason to refresh Robert Woody with it. And once it becomes that, it's normally turned over to the defense. Judge Zuniga yesterday kept saying that it's not a core work product, as it was not something that was just handwritten or just put together. It was something she had used to refresh a witness, if nothing else, that was on the stand in a trial. But today she did a backflip like she does many times. Defense also argued that Robert Woody had read more of that document than what he was just asked to, as he typically does on everything that he's given to. And they typically say, go ahead and read more if you like. So he'll start at the beginning and go at the end, so he can get a little bit of perspective on the conversation, because he is kind of slow on picking up on some of this stuff. The portion that was in question that was read is Robert Woody said he can go into the Frank Carson property, but it is locked. And then there's some transcript notes from in Marlissa's own personal handwriting, and there's notes all around the thing, but she gives it to a witness to testify with. Now, Judge Aniga, staying true to form, is saying it is work product and will be sealed. Just the one section is that she asked Robert Woody to read, and she did say, Judge Zuniga read the transcript, to read more if he likes, which they typically do, but just that one section will be given to the defense. So this is typically what goes on with Judge Zuniga. She'll say something, and she was pretty confident yesterday about it was not core work product, and she had shown it to a witness, and he had looked over the document. He didn't just read that one line, but this is typical of what goes on with Judge Aniga. Moving on, Judge Aniga asking what the relevance of some information that she's requesting about Brooks Varner. He's one of the defense witnesses. And apparently some issue had been brought up by Marlissa Ferreira, possibly an offer of proof or something, I don't know. She said that Mr. Varner has been called as a defense witness, but does not really seem to know anything. Marlissa Ferreira wants to ask him if Mr. Varner had any conversation with others in regards to the case. The interesting part about this is, my understanding is that Mr. Varner, I think, and I don't have any insight to this at all, but I think that he's a neighbor of the Poppencourt, or at least at the time. I don't know if he still is or what the story is. And the neighbors to the lot at Poppencourt, directly to the west and to the south behind them across the alley where the apartment is, and there's windows in those apartments overlook the lot. It's a two-story. It looks like a converted house with an apartment upstairs or something. And those neighbors were never interviewed by law enforcement. Surprisingly enough, they're saying that there's a crime scene of a homicide in that lot, and a body was buried there, and they never talked to the neighbors. Judge Aniga told the questions that Marlissa Ferreira had is not what she just argued, and that's typical of what happens too. She has time to think up of an argument or a better argument. Actually, Marlissa Ferreira can make a very good argument, at least for Judge Aniga's sake. And she said that Mr. Varner has talked to Robert Woody and the Outlaws. She seems to think, but she also said it doesn't appear that Mr. Varner has any information or anything to add. At this point is rant and rave time. Marlissa Ferreira started it off. She was telling Judge Aniga that Jai Gohel is again continually making comments behind her, and the possibility of the jury hears what he's saying. Part of the problem here is, if you haven't been to court, most of you haven't been to court because nobody's been there, just a handful of people. This is a very small courtroom. We have 3 co-defendants, and typically you have the district attorney who always sits closer to the jury box. Wherever the jury box is, on the right or left, that's where the DA sits. The defense typically sits on the table to the left of them or the right of them, on the opposite side of where the jury sits. Well, in this case, you've got the front table where the DA's sitting on the left, and Frank Carson, Percy Martinez are sitting on the right. And behind them is sitting Jai Gohil, Hansa Jorkson, and the Atwal on each side of them. Bobby Atwal is actually sitting out in the aisleway. He is almost directly behind Kurt Bunch. It's a bad situation waiting for something silly to happen. It's poor security. I'm surprised the sheriff's department actually allowed this, but there isn't anybody in custody here except for all the witnesses. And they have to pull everybody out of what they call the well to bring people like Robert Woody or anybody in custody up to the stand. So they're sitting right behind each other. If Jai Gohil and Bobby Atwal have a conversation, they can hear it. And it's probably not as bad with Hans Jorkson and Daljit Atwal, but they can probably still hear it. They're all very close together. There's no privacy. Percy Martinez is sitting right next to Kurt Bunch, so there's no privacy there in his conversations with Frank Carson. Vice versa, a lot of the things that Marlissa is constantly saying at the table, and Kurt Bunch is saying, is noticed by the defense. It's a bad situation, and she wants to constantly whine about it and saying they're trying to influence the jury. She gets to sit next to the jury all the time. She argued that Percy Martinez and Hans are giving speaking objections continually, and telling Judge Zuniga she is not enforcing the rules of the court. Marlissa Ferreira said that undue consumption of time are not legitimate objections, which they are actually 352. And the comments made last Thursday by one of the defense attorneys, which he meant Jai Gohil. And she's complaining that Jai Gohel has taken another day off from this case next Wednesday, so we don't have any court next Wednesday or Tuesday, because he has a another federal case that he has to go to court on. I believe it's in Fresno. So she's complaining that these attorneys have other cases, but she keeps Woody on redirect for 5 days. And this is part of the argument that they gave back at her. Judge Aniga says, yeah, he has federal court. She did allow him to go. Marlissa Ferrer did go on a long-winded rant, just about anything and everything. Usually when she does it, I quit writing because there's nothing of value to write down other than it's a long-winded rant. It went on for a few minutes. Anybody who spent any time in court is aware of how painful that can be. Attorney Hans argued that Ms. Ferreira has been testifying from some of the things that she has said to the witnesses, and Hans, he did express some dismay during the Marlissa Ferreira Robert Woody testimony, because there's some things that she did. She actually literally testified after giving him a document to read. She said what it said instead of asking a question. It was not a question, and it was stricken from the record, and these are the type of things that go on. So this just turned out to a general overall bitch session. They need to do it every once in a while to vent. Jai Gohel argued under 352 of the Evidence Code, it says the court may exclude evidence as an undue consumption of time, so it's a legitimate objection. He says it is Marlissa Ferrera's constant complaint of many things, like right now, that is delaying this trial and has had Robert Woody on redirect for 4 days now. They have their right to their frustration of the district attorney's issues that are going on here in this case. Percy Martinez argued he disagrees with Marlissa Ferrera's comments. Court has given March 30, 2019 as the last day for evidence, and it should and armed arguments, and it should go to the jury on April 1st. I don't believe that's going to happen, and I don't believe Judge Zuniga feels that's going to happen. In essence, I don't believe that she told them the truth. She said, Percy Martinez said, now there's been 5 days of redirect of Robert Woody and cherry picking and wasting a lot of time. Marlissa Ferreira addressed the court saying the court has made a ruling and they should comply. She says that the court makes rules and she abides by them, quote unquote. She said she abides by the rules that the court makes. She says defense attorneys having other court days is unacceptable. So it's unacceptable that defense attorneys represent somebody in court. Judge Aniga says anything else by anybody, and everybody was pretty much done. Says she agrees that the jury has an impression of all the attorneys, and she didn't say look at anybody in particular, or say anybody in particular, but she was looking at Marlissa Ferreira. She says all engage in bad behavior. Marlissa Ferreira also engages in unprofessional behavior. Well, that's what she said. Marlissa Ferreira engages in unprofessional behavior. She says the state bar could be reported of all the behavior of all the attorneys in the courtroom. She also notes Marlissa Ferreira's badgering of Jai Gohel many times in the objections and the way she objects when he's questioning witnesses. So everybody got that out of their system. Judge Iniga told everybody they're bad boys and girls, and it turned back to the case at hand. Attorney Hahn said he wants to play an audio of the transport of Robert Woody, and he has to do a little editing for tomorrow. And so it's just a little snippet. He's going to finish his um, cross today when he does his cross, but he just has a little snippet. He's going to edit it and have it ready for tomorrow. Jury came up at 2:07. So Mario Seferis asked what Robert Woody about burying the body and officers being around the popping cork on occasion. When Baljit Atwal backed in to the lot, there was no officers there and the stores were closed. There was no one in the parking lot and there was no police officer when they came out of the lot. And then later on, he said Walter Wells showed up at Poppin' Cork. He was asked if any conversations between the Atwells and Robert Woody about anything that happened earlier. He didn't hear anything. From the burial night to the removal night, he asked if there was any barbecues, any type of activities on the lot, any officers that were on the side lot. He said no, there was nothing activity at that time. He was asked during the time that the body was in the ground at Poppin' Cork, he had still worked just about every day, 12 hours a day. He'd come in around noon and worked until they closed. She asked him, since he's testifying the last few weeks, has he told the truth? He says yes. She says, one last thing. She said no further questions, and then Hans got up and ready to start asking questions. She says, whoops, forgot something. Does he know the date that he signed that paper, which that's the one with the satellite view, Google Maps satellite view of the Craig Carson property where he made his markings of where everything was, where the gate was. He signed his name at the bottom, but he signed it and he dated it 3/2/14, which was the day after he was arrested and interviewed. So he says, well, that was the date that I signed it. She asked him if somebody had told him that was the date or whatever. He said, no, that was the date. So that's the date he put on there. So he didn't get where she was trying to go with it, that the wrong date was put on it. No further questions by Marlissa Ferreira. Hans started his cross again. Asking about the description of the boots that he had told the investigators, and he said they were work boots. He said the truth in the August 14th of 2015 interview, and the next day was the walkthroughs of all the properties, and he said he told the truth then also. He was asked if he gave investigators any identification of the boots, and he looked confused and he has asked if he had any memory to the night of the event. Does he have individual recall? Remember, Robert Woody is reading a lot of transcripts because he doesn't recall. He's not refreshing his memory. Therein lies the problem. He is refreshing and just reading what he had said in either the interview or the prior testimony. But he doesn't have individual recall. He was asked if he remembers clearly what the boots looked like from then to this day. And he looked really confused, had a confused look on his face when he was asked that. He didn't have a clue what he was being asked. So Hahn said at Pop and Cork on August 15th, 2015, that was the day of the walkthrough, Steve Jacobson asked Robert Woody to describe the boots, and he said they were like black. They said, was there a hole in them? He says he didn't know. He told Steve Jacobson he didn't know the color, and if there was any distinctive like screws. He goes, ha ha ha, no, 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 was his response. That's exactly what he said. And remember, the boot in Corey Kaufman's boot, one of them had a screw that held the sole together. Actually, I think it was a couple wood screws that were sent through it to hold it together. He said he had no remembrance of the boots, talking about the boots with Steve Jacobson. He told Marlissa Ferreira he had told the truth during the reenactment. And between March 1st of 2014, which was when he was first arrested, and 8/14 of 15, if he had reviewed any discovery. And he kind of looked confused again. He doesn't know what discovery is, but basically he's saying if he's been shown any paperwork. There was an objection sidebar. And again, after the sidebar, he was asked if there was any review of any reports in regards to the Corey Kaufman investigation, like an autopsy report. He says he did not recall reading any autopsy report. They had him refresh his with a transcript, and on 8/14 and 15, that was the day before the walkthrough, he told Steve Jacobson that he had read an autopsy report. His private investigator had read some reports to him. Now he's saying he does not recall his private investigator reading reports. Again, refreshing with preliminary hearing transcript testimony, he said that his private investigator had read, quote, little bit, Lilbit, little bit of information about the case. And so that the Johnson comment, that's the Asses Grass comment on Johnson Street, he didn't think that happened till, he didn't remember that happening or believe that happened until Kim Stout testimony, and somebody had told him about that. He was told that Kim Stout and a neighbor had said that it happened. It was so, talking about the Johnson Street incident again. It was told it must have happened, and he said he told the truth in a preliminary hearing. In the preliminary hearing, he said in the last few days he had told some truths and some lies. In the interviews is what he was talking about. And he did that because he was supposed to, he thought he was going to be supplied an attorney by the Outlaws. And so he lied to trying to give him some time to get an attorney. It was in 2016, that he had reached out to law enforcement and he gave those reasons to why he held out information. That is when he said Walter Wells was there, and Walter Wells had told him to get back into the property and clean up the mess after the alleged homicide, which he did recant, by the way. And he also said that Frank Carson was there, which he did recant. He changed his story, and this was after the infamous visit from his mother, Beverly Woody, at the jail with a note up to the window telling him what to say. And they've admitted to doing that. So there was all kinds of objections again at this point with Walter Wells, the Frank Carson comments, and all that stuff. Led to another sidebar. So then he started talking about the July 22nd, 2016 interview. That's the one with Marlissa Ferreira and Steve Jacobson. And he was asked why he didn't say the things that he said previously to that interview. That's the interview where he told him Walter Wells was there, Frank Carson was there. I think I just said the opposite, but July 22nd, 2016, that's when he said Walter Wells and Frank Carson was there. It was in April, 3 months prior to that, that he had told his attorney that they weren't there. And that's why everything ended up in such a big mess, as his attorney knew that was there with him in that interview on July 22nd, 2016. The same attorney that took a recorded interview from him in April where he was talking about they weren't there. So that's where things kind of got messy for him. He said he held back information waiting for the legal help to come. And he also said that he had a problem. He didn't trust Martin Baker, whatever the issues are there. And that's the same law firm he confirmed is that with Bruce Perry and the young man, and I forget his name, that's in the courtroom with him. Today it's the same law firm. He was asked about where Marlissa Ferreira had brought up the bathroom break on March 1st of 2014, and Steve Jacobson said in the bathroom he needs to tell the truth, and he had talked to Candy Watts, and just tell Steve Jacobson what happened on the property. And Woody was really getting kind of pissy at this point. He didn't like being questioned about all this. Much of the conversation, I believe, was going over his head. And he kind of got mad, and he said, yeah, I had to take a shit, and I had to take a piss. And then I washed my hands, and Steve Jacobson said that, and I came out and talked to Candy Watts. I talked to Candy Watts before I went in, then I took a shit and pissed, blah, 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 blah. Oh, no. Anyway, he was really aggravated at that point for some reason. He was asked if he had actually started to bond with Steve Jacobson, and especially when they were out on the property doing the walkthroughs. But Robert Woody had told him that the incident occurred on 9th Street in the street and not on the property. He said Bobby and Dee were there, and he again was refreshing with the transcript, and this is what he said in the preliminary hearing. And Frank and Kurt Bunch had told him that it happened on Frank Carson's property, not out on the street. He said Daljeet Otwal had told him to keep his mouth shut, and Daljeet had told him that several times prior to and after the alleged homicide. That's one of the things that he had. Oh, wait a minute. He told Kurt Bunch that a couple of days before, law enforcement came by the popping cork, so they decided they needed to move the body. That interview also occurred, and I believe that was Corey Brown. That occurred in the back room in the bar area in the back of the store. Took a break. The jury was out about 27 minutes. They came back up at 3:30. Um, Hans, still continuing with Robert Woody on his recross, asked him about 8/14 of 2015. That was the night that all the defendants were arrested and booked, and they had Woody watch them being booked, probably through video, I would guess. And he was asked about when Marlissa Ferreira asked him to describe the property in Mariposa, and he said there was a gully and then an open area in a forest. Hans asked him if Steve Jacobson had a laptop and had indicated to him where the remains were found or located. He did not recall, refreshed his memory. He did not recall still a computer and Steve Jacobson. Hans showed him a video on Hans's laptop, and Steve Jacobson and Robert Woody they were videotaping him standing by the edge of the roadway. He couldn't go down because he was shackled, but he was directing people to where he was found. And this was after Corey Brown was down below, and they asked him if that was where he was at, and Steve Jacobson told him that's where it was at. And it was right outside the vehicles. And Steve Jacobson was asking if anything looked familiar. Robert Woody said it was nighttime. Corey Brown was already down in the open area past the gully. And he said it was about where Corey Brown was and pretty much where he is now. He directed him around a little bit. So the defense is saying that he was directed to the site more or less. Attorney Hans had no further questions. The defense doesn't really want to delay this any more than they have to at this point. Robert Woody's been beaten to death in this whole thing. Jai Gohel took evidence number 735, which was his testimonial plea agreement. And there was objection to outside the scope by Marlissa Ferreira, sidebar. When they come back, he says the plea agreement states that he has to testify completely, truthfully, and accurately, and it's signed on August 3rd, 2016. He agrees. He says his response in October 5th of 2016 in the prelim, he had testified about Robert Woody had said something to the effect that it didn't happen on Johnson Street when he made the comment to Corey Kaufman about his ass being grass. And Robert Woody admitted the other day that he had lied in court, he had lied in the preliminary hearing. He said he lied. Now he's saying he lied in the preliminary hearing. So Jai Gohel says that's possible perjury if that's false. Is that true? Robert Woody didn't say, well, it wasn't exactly a lie, is what he was trying to say. He was trying to minimize it. Marlissa Ferrer objected, with Judge Zuniga immediately overruling her. And they reread the transcript and had the court reporter reread what he had just said like 2 or 3 questions ago, that he admitted that he lied in the preliminary hearing. So again, Jai asked him if he failed to fulfill any conditions, the DA could void the agreement and charge him with perjury and reinstate the charges. And are you worried about being prosecuted for perjury? He had a very serious look on his face, and he said yes. And he said, Jai Gohel asked about the Miranda Dykes body wire. that he had made up parts about cutting up the body. Yes. He said just parts of it, very little he actually said he made up. But he said cutting up the body. Well, yeah, I lied about that. Um, and cutting up the remains. Well, yeah, I lied about that. And pulling the teeth out. Well, yeah, I lied about that. And burning the hair. Yeah, I lied about that. And then he was asked about the key holder and who that was. If you remember the other day, he mentioned key holders, and he says, well, Bobby and Dee are the key holders. He says, but he was asked, didn't you tell Miranda Dykes that you were the key holder? He goes, well, yeah, I did. He was trying to impress a girl. But he says the Atwalls are the key holders. Is not that part's not a lie. So he was telling Miranda Dykes was not a lie about the key holder. He really started getting confused in here, and it became problematic for him a little bit. Jai Gohill asked him if he was drinking heavily during that time, which he said he was. He was smoking meth during that entire conversation. You can hear the lighters and the stuff going on when we're having that conversation on the body wire. He said, yeah, they were smoking meth heavily. Some of the information that he got was off the streets, and the comment that he made about the kid that jumped the fence and not coming the last fence he'll jump and stuff. He got that information was a comment that was given to him, or information that was given to him from Keith Hobbs. It was just kind of street talk. Now, if you guys know who Keith Hobbs is, that's Eula Keys' son. Keith Hobbs and Michael Cooley. Michael Cooley is Eula Keys' boyfriend, or whatever you want to call him. And Keith Hobbs and Michael Cooley do not get along. He said the Atwalls killed and told him to keep his mouth shut. And even though he was very high and drunk at the time, he remembers things clearly. At the prelim, he told Miranda Dykes he said that he was trying to romance her. He was just trying to impress a girl. I guess in that culture, you impress a girl by telling her how you mutilated a body and killed somebody. And he also said that he was drunk and high, and he was trying to get her drunk and high. And he said he never said during the preliminary hearing the Atwalls had told him to keep his mouth shut. He was asked if he ever heard any of the law enforcement officers tell him the Atwalls said to ever keep his mouth shut. He said no. Yeah, no. He really wasn't too sure about that. He was constant confusion going on with him.